Welcome to Defining Dad Bod, where my dad, Coach Alex Van Houten, posts his 14 years of experience to work for you. You should listen to him. Here's Pretty Beast Mode. Who knows who we could be if we could become 1% better every single day.
What is up, guys? This is Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. I hope you're doing super well. You're listening to episode 6 of season 3 of Defining Dad Bod, the 5 pillars of digestive health. I'm very excited about today's episode because we're having our favorite PhD in nutrition come back on, Dr. Adrian Chavez, for his 4th interview with Defining Dad Bod. Seems like he and I need to do a mini-series or something, because we always have so much to talk about. And today's episode is going to be amazingly valuable. If you found our probiotic episode valuable, then today as we talk through the 5 pillars of digestive health, you're going to want to grab a pen and paper, because we get deep into things like the genetic differences of inflammation in the gut, different foods that can be bothersome to different people, and the signs and symptoms that you need to stop down and do something about where your gut's at right now. Also in this show, I talk a bit about my personal experience with ulcerative colitis and how Dr. Adrian Chavez's work helped me to mitigate my flare-up without any medications and to keep moving forward well. Before the show, I've got some food for thought and an announcement for you. My food for thought for you this week comes from Genesis. And before you raise an eyebrow at me, I promise it has to do with your body, especially in relationship to our upcoming flu season and the uncertainty around our pandemic right now. Almost everybody I know has heard the story of Noah. That's the guy who's hanging out at his house one day, and God says, "Build an ark. I'm gonna flood the earth. It's not gonna be pretty." And so Noah builds a giant boat in his backyard. And as the children's story goes, he invites the animals 2 by 2 to come hang out on his ark so that they can weather the storm with him and his family. By the end of the story, Noah and his family are the only people left on earth. Everything else is wiped out, and God puts a rainbow in the sky to promise Noah that he'll never flood the earth again. Fast forward to today, and people see this as a cute children's story, but don't often think about how it applies to their life. What's interesting is that the psychological motif, the flood is always coming, is actually a very helpful motivating factor for many people with relationship to health and fitness. Are you, your household, and your body prepared for the worst, or at least as well as you can be right now? Now, I'm not a big doomsdayer, although I have been known to talk a little bit about the zombie apocalypse. I'm speaking specifically in reference to your physical body. Are there some changes to your nutrition that you need to be making right now to boost your immune system for the winter? Are there some changes to your exercise consistency, volume, and intensity that would better equip you to weather a coming storm? I like to say to my friends regularly, building an ark in your backyard looks really crazy until it doesn't stop raining. And I don't know about you right now, but when I look at the world around me, I'm starting to feel like it hasn't stopped raining in a while. And I'd like to make sure my boat's ready for the storm. The thing about building a boat, however, in preparation for a flood, is that it's a pretty thankless job. You'll spend hours sweating and toiling, and sometimes it's hard to remember what it is that you're building it for. Try to enjoy the process, stay consistent, and put in the work where other people might not be willing to. For some, it might be a cute kid's story, but as for me and my house, the story of Noah is the affirmation of somebody who's willing to put in the work before everybody else knows that that work mattered. And if the time comes that you need to cash in on some of the physical well-being, the fitness, the nutrition habits that you've created over the past few weeks, months, and years, that you find yourself in a well-built boat. In the meantime, I see you working hard. If you need some encouragement, reach out at coachal@definingdadbod.com. Now that you've got something to munch on, I've got an exciting announcement for you. Finally, after a long-awaited period, our TrueFit Mastermind, called the Very Faithful 40 Challenge, is finally open for registration. And unlike many of the events that we've done so far here at Defining Dad Bod, this one's particularly exclusive. You'll find the link in the description below to register for one of our 10 spots for this mastermind. The challenge begins August 16th and extends through September 25th. And with your registration comes personalized nutrition and exercise coaching, 6 90-minute seminars where we're going to deep dive the practicality of the science of the TrueFit series. And there's a whole bunch of other supportive goodies that you'll get along the way. I encourage you to check out that link and see whether or not it's right for you in your journey right now. In my mind, this will work out best for you if you're a bit nerdy about the whole health and fitness thing, and you want 6 weeks of support and coaching and making this science practical in your life. This is not a 90-day challenge or a 75 hard. everything we do in the 6-week mastermind is going to be geared toward long-term health and fitness changes that will stick with us through the end of this year and into next. And my hope is that by participating in this challenge, your health and fitness visions and aspirations will be changed positively for the rest of your life. Find that link in the show notes, definingdadbod.com/shop/faithful40. That's definingdadbod.com/shop/faithful40. Registration's open right now, and it closes on August 15th or when all the spots are full. That's definingdadbod.com/shop/faithful40. Now, without further ado, let's get to my conversation with Dr. Adrian Chavez about the 5 pillars of digestive health. What's up, guys? This is Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. I hope you're doing super well. I am above the moon excited about our guest today, Dr. Adrian Chavez. You actually hold a very special place in Defining Dad Bod history as the most interviewed guest on the show thus far. So high five and thanks for joining us, and thanks for your support and expertise.
Man, that is an honor. I appreciate that. I didn't know that, and now that I know that, I just feel extremely honored to be on here.
That's right. Well, so it's the 4th time in 2 years, actually. So you got on here and talked with my audience about being their own best advocate in their healthcare. We talked about should you go keto, so that'll be a lot of fun. And then last time you were on, you and I talked about the role of energy expenditure and calorie balance in both fat loss and the coaching of fat loss and the long-term efficacy of that. So those links are in the show notes below if anybody's interested in diving into hearing Dr. Chavez. The reason I say that, brother, is because we're not going to talk about your superhero origin story here. If you guys don't know it, go check it out. He talks all about where he's from, but he's definitely worth listening to, and that's why he's here. First, congratulations are in order, dude. You're about to get married. In fact, I think by the time listeners hear this, you will be married. What's the date?
Yeah, so the date is, so recording this on a Monday, it's next Sunday. So we will be married in 6 days. Yeah.
Wow. Well, congratulations, brother, to you and your lovely bride-to-be. I know, man, this whole pandemic thing's really thrown a wrench in your planning, I'm sure. So I'm glad it's finally happening.
Yeah, so are we. I mean, we're almost like, let's just get this over with now, because we've had to make so many changes that it's always, even now, it didn't feel real until like this weekend when we're like, hey, we're here and there's nothing that's gonna like stop it now. So now we can fully charge ahead.
Wow. So that's probably been very strange because you're like, here it comes. Oh, just kidding. Here it comes. Oh, just kidding.
We don't know. We don't know if we're actually going to be able to follow through with this. So now it's real. Now in the week leading up to it, like I think last weekend was the first time we're like, okay, now we need to really buckle down because we're going through with this next weekend without any further delay.
Well, my best to you and your 3 beautiful children and your future union. I just think very highly of you as a father and as a man. So I know that from the outside looking in, I want the best for you guys. And so this is good. I'm very excited for you, man.
I appreciate it, man. The sentiment is held, back as well. Like I see you and your posts and everything that you do. And I'm like, man, this guy's doing something positive for the world. And I love it.
Doing my best. So that said, with the whole pandemic thing around, we're here, by the way, just so the listeners know, we're here to talk about specifically inflammatory bowel disease. We'll be talking about Crohn's, we'll talk about ulcerative colitis, and then the whole umbrella of things that generally either lead to those diagnoses or our border. I don't know. You'll be able to speak more intelligently to that than I. This is not something I cover often, as you can tell. Like you said, nobody likes to talk about bloody diarrhea. Don't worry, guys. We won't get too hard into that, but it's a symptom for sure. But before we get into that, I recently was listening to your episode about some of the things that we can control with regard to being well prepared to fight an infection if we get them. Not just COVID, but also things like, we're going to be entering flu season soon. Like being a human right now is it's a rough go of it, right? But we're in the middle of a supplement series here on the show, and you were very specific in your show talking about the important benefits of lifestyle, like sleep habits and all around good nutritional habits and exercise. And you have a fantastic podcast that I'll link in the show notes below for people to check out who want to get really deep into things. But you covered 4 specific supplements that had antiviral properties in peer-reviewed research. And I wondered if you wouldn't mind walking through those with me here, just so that if listeners are thinking, hey, I'd like to, boost my immune system walking into school season and all that, how might I go about doing that? So you recently covered those. Would you mind listing those out for us here and just having a brief conversation about that?
Yeah, definitely. And two of those are going to be extremely important in this discussion that we have today about IBD, and you'll hear me bring them up later. But the 4 supplements that I recommended, and again, on top of all the lifestyle stuff, that's the most important. We want to supplement the things that we're doing in terms of exercise and sleep and nutrition with, the things that are clinically proven. And the first one, vitamin D. I mean, vitamin D, the research on vitamin D is so spectacular in terms of like the reduction in cancer risk and heart disease risk and bone fracture and just everything across the board. We have to pay attention to this. This should be primary care. Your doctor should be measuring your vitamin D level every single time, especially if you have IBD, and we'll talk about that again later. But we should know our vitamin D levels, and we should know how to optimize those. We want it between, and there's some disagreement in the literature, but most people will say 50 to 70, somewhere around that range in terms of blood level, and that's nanograms per milliliter in your blood. That's an easy test to get done. You can literally pay $30 online, lifeextension.com. Go to your nearest LabCorp, get a vitamin D test, and see where you're at. If you're low, your immune system is not going to function properly. Your immune system is going to be kind of shifted towards a more pro-inflammatory state, which is not what we want. So you definitely want to keep vitamin D levels at an optimal level. A lot of people think about supplementation. Sunlight is my primary area of supplementation that I recommend. If you can't get it that way, then of course you can use the supplement. There's great data on the safety and efficacy of vitamin D as a supplement. So I do recommend that, but you want to make sure that you're getting into that range. So the supplement dose is going to be varied depending on what level of vitamin D you're at. So if you're at 20, you're probably going to want to supplement with over 5,000 IUs, somewhere around that area. If you're at 40, 2,000 IUs a day might cover it and get you up into that 50 to 70 range. So in there, I mean, this is something that it just blows my mind that it's not even starting to be incorporated in clinical practice. There's no money in it, I guess. But in terms of boosting immunity and, insulin sensitivity and heart disease risk, like everything, vitamin D is tied to that. And, part of this reason is because we used to live outside and we used to be exposed to the sun hours and hours and hours per day, and we're not anymore. So unless you're going to do that purposely, in some way, like for example, me running outside a lot, that's how I get a lot of my vitamin D. Unless you're doing that, then you're going to need to supplement in most cases.
Can I pause real quick? Because that's so huge. I actually have a couple of my friends, followers, social media, they pick on me regularly because they're always joking that I've lost my shirt, like that I just don't seem to wear clothes ever. And well, like I don't ever take pictures from the waist down. I guess that's to everybody's benefit. But I joke, I say I'm getting vitamin D, but I'm not joking. Like I'm not joking at all, because it's such a huge thing. And if you're going to supplement with it on the market, I mean, what is creatine monohydrate? Probably the only cheaper supplement there is than vitamin D. Like it's not
free.
It's not expensive. Like you're not going to be like blowing your retirement on vitamin D.
It's $10 for like a 3-month supply. So
exactly.
Vitamin D is an absolute must. And just like you said, I mean, I run outside. I do that purposefully just so I can get vitamin D. We take the kids to the pool. I put it on sunscreen after I start to feel a little bit burnt, but before that, I'm getting my vitamin D. Put it on sunscreen all the time. Every time you're outside, you're blocking the production of vitamin D in your body. That's not what we want to do. So you don't want to get burned. You don't want to, because when you burn your skin, then you're increasing the production of free radicals and things that can lead to the, potential skin cancer in the future. So we want to avoid that. But in terms of like getting that exposure to vitamin D, we want to allow our sun to get some exposure before we decide to put on any type of sunblock or sunscreen, so that we can get those vitamin D levels up.
My man, thank you. Appreciate that.
So that's the most important. Zinc, another one, extremely important. Zinc, I mean, the clinical research on zinc in infection, in viral infection, it's pretty strong. There's a lot of, I mean, everyone saw, this American Frontline Doctors news thing where even that lady talked about zinc. So I don't agree with anything she said for the most part, but, the zinc is important. The science is there. The mechanisms are there for zinc's role in our immune ability to basically fight off viral infections. It's the data's there for helping to prevent colds. So zinc is one that not everyone's deficient in. I'd say vitamin D is like very high deficiency level. But when it comes to zinc, there's a lot of people who have insufficient amounts of zinc. Unless you're eating a decent amount of like high zinc rich foods like oysters and other seafood and red meat, you're going to be lower on the level of zinc. Like my son is a vegetarian, for example. And I mean, as soon as he turned vegetarian, and this is of course anecdotal, but he started getting sick more. And I'm pretty confident that was his zinc level. So I started supplementing him early on because it's hard to get enough zinc if you're not eating animal
100%,
foods.
yeah.
So zinc is extremely important as well. The data is quite strong in zinc in the immune function, zinc in recovery from exercise, another important one as well. And then zinc kind of goes along with vitamin C. A lot of the studies that have been done on zinc are the combination of zinc and vitamin C for prevention of colds, for exercise recovery. So I recommend, both of those. Zinc, you can overdose because it's a mineral and it can get stored in the body. You can get high levels of zinc that can lead to negative effects. So you want to be careful with supplementation with zinc. I usually recommend 25 to 50 max supplement wise, and then
milligrams, correct?
Milligrams, right? Yes, 25 to 50 milligrams. Going higher than that for a short period of time might be okay, but for most people, and it's hard when you're giving general recommendations because I don't know how much is in your diet or what size you are or any of that type of stuff. So that's why the 25 to 50 is usually a safe range. Going above that, going 75, 100 for a long period of time can lead to overdose. So I don't recommend that at all. But the 25 to 50 is the range that should get most people to that level where you're getting some of those antiviral immune enhancing benefits of zinc. As we mentioned, vitamin C, the data on vitamin C is all over the place. I've seen, high dose vitamin C saying, that's the way to go, and just doing like a gram 6 to 8 times per day. Other studies, most of the research is between half a gram to 2 grams. And there seems to be a benefit around that range as well. There's no harm in taking vitamin C. You're not going to overdose with it. So I kind of lean on the side of like, I'm just going to go really, really high if I feel like I'm getting sick. If it was like, as a daily preventative measure, I usually recommend around a gram, maybe 2 grams at most. But if I'm starting to get sick, usually I'll bump my zinc up to 50, bump my vitamin C up to, 5 grams per day, 6 grams per day. The only negative side effect of vitamin C is that you might get diarrhea. And that's when you've hit that upper limit of your body's ability to absorb it, and you need to back off a little bit. But that's the worst case scenario. There's no negative impact of going high amounts of vitamin C. So that's why I just recommend, until we have more research on it, which, we don't really have great research on, higher doses of zinc or vitamin C. Most studies on vitamin C were using supplements between, like I said, half a gram to 2 grams, which is a relatively low dose compared to what's used in some studies that show some good benefit, which is like 6 to 8 grams per day. So another one that I recommend, elderberry, this one's a little bit more, I exercise more caution with this recommendation because elderberry in the long term has shown to have some more negative side effects. But elderberry is one that if you start to feel sick, taking it for a couple of weeks at a time can be a really good strategy. There's lots of antiviral studies showing like the antiviral properties of elderberry. There's studies showing that it helps to shorten the cold and potentially help prevent the cold. So when we look at elderberry, we just want to look at that one with more caution. I keep that one on hand. Again, if I'm starting to get sick, just like when I bump vitamin C up, I might start taking elderberry, depending on, how I'm feeling. If I'm feeling really sick, I'm throwing the whole, all 4 of those at it and increasing my vitamin D level as well. But typically I like the vitamin D for like a maintenance type thing. Zinc, you just want to make sure you're eating enough zinc. If not, taking a good multi that has zinc in it is a good strategy. And to cover like all your bases, because vitamin A is important in immune function as well. So that's another one that there can be deficiencies in. So that's why sometimes I just recommend multi. You cover all the bases. There's a multivitamin I like called Pure Encapsulations makes it. It's called the ONE multivitamin. It has 25 milligrams of zinc. It has 2,000 IUs of vitamin D. It has the vitamin A. It has the B vitamins in their methylated form. So I like that one. It's 50 cents a day. Not really much harm in, spending. It's not like this huge cost out of pocket. So that's the one that I typically recommend. It covers all those bases. And then if you wanted to add some vitamin C on top of that, and then the occasional elderberry, if you felt like you were getting sick in the short term, that's what I would recommend in terms of supplements for antiviral. And those are the things, in my opinion, that probably have the most research. When it comes to COVID, we are still kind of in the dark because we just, they're not going to study nutritional supplements right now. There's going to be no, I mean,
you don't want to be part of a double-blind placebo vitamin D study on COVID.
Yeah, no, that's, I mean, we'll see some data come out like vitamin D levels and COVID, response, which shows extremely favorable results in that level. And then, out of Asia, they study vitamin C. That's where most of our supplement studies come from, is Asia, because the United States just really doesn't put the amount of investment that other countries do into really learning about these nutritional supplements and how to use them in therapeutic ways.
Man, I appreciate that rundown. That was like, I hope somebody was furiously taking notes, because that's good. And maybe we can make this go viral in a way that's helpful to people beyond some of the things we've seen go viral recently. But anyway,
yeah.
That said, I appreciate that. And then I do have a confession to make. And the confession is this: my wife makes elderberry syrup.
Oh, okay.
Like, she'll get the elderberries and like she makes it for our community and stuff, especially during flu season. I actually hate the smell of have you ever cooked elderberry syrup?
No,
in your
I've
house?
never cooked it, so I don't have to deal with that.
So it's super funny because my wife will go, "Oh man, I love the smell," and my son, he's like, "Oh, it smells great." To me, don't let this turn you off to elderberry, by the way. This is not research. This is just anecdotal, subjective Alex Van Houten here, okay? It smells like the stuff they threw on top of barf when somebody barfed in the bus,
the powder stuff?
On the bus ride home from school, You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the powdered stuff, right?
So, yeah, exactly. So it might just be like a subconscious association with vomit. But anyway, I also take elderberry syrup in the winter and during, when I'm, like you said, when you're starting to feel sick, like, hey man, pop that in there. So thank you so much for that rundown. I will link the show that you ran through this with everybody, because you went into a little more detail and stuff on your show. And then you also provided the research if they were interested in reading up on it for themselves. But I want to make sure that if we can help people with this sort of thing right now, that they're hearing it. So thank you. I appreciate that rundown.
Yeah. And one of the things I also want to mention is, like, when I recorded this, we didn't know anything about what was going on. It was this new pandemic, and, everyone's thinking like, oh, we have, a short period of time, like we got to try to protect ourselves. I mean, this is something that looks like it's going to stay.
Yeah.
And this is where we need to double even down further than what I was talking about on that episode of, like, eventually most of us are going to get exposed to it. So you are responsible for making yourself, I like this term, like, harder to kill. Like, you're building up health and resilience so that when you do get exposed to these type of things, because this isn't the only pandemic we're going to see in our lifetime.
True story.
You're ready for it. You're not in the population of people who is more likely going to have a really poor negative outcome when you do get exposed.
100%. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again here. Just when I'm talking to people, it's like, it's one thing to make yourself harder to kill, but a lot of people want to protect their own family members. And it's like, hey man, if you can reserve medical resources because you're harder to kill, and there are other people in your family that you want to give the ICU bed to, like, if it ever came to that, like, be that person, hey, I fought this thing off. Like,
yeah,
here's all the medical resources you need to make sure you're taken care of. I say that to my family pretty often. Like, look, if you can do your cardio and you don't need to take an ICU bed for my grandpa, get it done. Because that would be good.
Yeah. That's another thing I heard recently. And I think about this too. Someone said, I go for a really hard exercise training session, like at least 5 days a week right now, because that's my COVID test. Like, if I can't do it, like if I can't complete this cardio session, maybe I need to go get tested and actually get an antibody test.
No joke.
Or whatever type of test.
No joke.
Yeah, no, every time I go for a run, that's how I feel. Like, I was thinking that before I heard it, and I was like, dang, I didn't even think, like, every time I'm going for a run, I'm like, there's no way I have COVID right now, because I'm killing myself.
I just ran 10 miles. I'm good. Yeah. Love it.
Yeah.
So switching gears a little bit here, the primary reason I wanted to bring you on today, and this is both personal and for my audience as well, is you specialize in a very important, I don't want to call it a niche, in a very important place of public and nutritional service. I'll say that. And that is, let me know if I'm saying this wrong, but that is in the realm of inflammatory bowel disease and treating it nutritionally in a way that's positive and beneficial for people. It creates great outcomes. Not to say that you're anti-medicine, but that if you can make dietary changes that support your digestive tract in a positive and powerful way, then you're going to have better outcomes. You're going to have better quality of life. You might need to rely less on medication, yada, yada, yada. So today we're talking about inflammatory bowel disease. And I thought we might start with talking about what the heck that actually is, because some people don't even know. Like if I say IBD, people go, oh, you mean like IBS? Like, it's a little different, but we could talk about that. So what is inflammatory bowel disease? And if I messed up in talking about what you specialize in, please fill in the blank there for me.
Yeah, so I work with IBS and IBD. So I work with digestive issues all the way around. Most of my clients are IBS, but about a third of them are IBD. So it's about 2/3, 1/3, just because IBS is much more common and prevalent. About 1 in 10 people in the population have IBS. The definition of that is just you basically have bloating and some change in stool. Like you're either constipated or diarrhea, or you have both. So if you have stomach pain along with constipation, diarrhea, or both, that can give you a diagnosis for IBS. I mean, that's all it is. So there's 10% of the population walking around who on a regular basis daily is like bloated and pain, and then they have constipation or diarrhea. Those people are considered IBS.
Got it.
IBD is a very small percentage of the population, between about 1 and 2%. This is inflammatory bowel disease. So there's two primary types of inflammatory bowel disease. There's ulcerative colitis, and this is an inflammation of the colon. So like the distal part of the digestive tract. So, the area right before where, the poop comes out is what is inflamed. And then we have inflammatory bowel disease. The other one is Crohn's disease. And that one basically impacts the entire digestive tract. And it's a deeper form of inflammatory bowel disease. So in ulcerative colitis, there's ulcerations on the very outside portion of the gut. So our gut, basically, the outside of it, there's ulcerations on that area. Whereas Crohn's, the inflammation is deeper inside of the gut lining. And just affects a larger portion of the gut lining. So Crohn's is generally more of a concern because the inflammation is more widespread and it's deeper in terms of inside of the gut lining. But that's the difference between these two conditions. What people need to understand more so than just kind of like the overarching definition is kind of the experience of what people with IBD experience. Because this is where, for me, I've read probably 1,000 research papers on IBD at this point, because I worked with the client early on, and that was my first time learning about it. Because even going through a nutrition program and learning nutrition, I never really learned about inflammatory bowel disease. And then when I first started learning about it and reading about it and learning this firsthand experience, I was like, wow, there's a segment of the population who's experiencing this stuff, and they're not talking about
They're
it.
Suffering quietly. Yeah.
Suffering quietly. Exactly. So the suffering will kind of explain that. So people who have IBD, Crohn's, colitis, a lot of times their symptoms it's bloody diarrhea. It's a lot of stomach pain. It's not being able to eat anything without either having diarrhea or throwing up. A lot of times it's, 7, 8, 10 times running to the bathroom, having mucus and blood coming out of their stool. And I know this is very graphic, but I just want to give everyone an explanation. And what's happening is the inner wall of the digestive tract is extremely inflamed, and the immune system is basically attacking. It's an autoimmune disease. These are autoimmune conditions where the immune system is actually attacking the tissue and breaking down the tissue of the digestive tract. Many people with Crohn's disease, about 50% over the course of 10 years, end up having to have a section of their intestines actually cut out in order to, that's the best treatment for the disease.
Right.
Other people, the standard medications for IBD typically are immunosuppressive medications, anti-inflammatory medications. They're designed to stop the immune system from attacking your own tissue. And that's pretty much your options in terms of pharmaceuticals if you have IBD. So a lot of people will present with, stomach pain. They'll present with some bloody diarrhea, maybe some extreme stomach pain of some sort. They'll go to the doctor. They'll get a colonoscopy. The doctor will say, hey, you have ulcerative colitis or Crohn's. Most of the time, the people don't even know what that is who get diagnosed. They've never heard of it in the past.
Right.
They're completely in the dark. And the doctor says, hey, this is a genetic condition, which is what they tell most patients. There's really not much you can do about it. There's some foods that may, eating a bland diet may help. Like that's usually the extent of the nutritional advice that's given. And then they're put on some type of, strong anti-inflammatory immunosuppressant medications.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, over the course of time, the disease worsens because whatever conditions allowed for that disease to develop in the first place haven't been changed, which is usually nutrition and a couple of other things that I'll talk about in a second. But the disease worsens over time. They end up on stronger medications over time, and then a lot of times that ends up leading to a complete bowel resection, where a piece of the bowel is taken out, and that's like the treatment. Many of these people suffer from extreme, negative impact on their quality of life, because if you're going out to eat with friends and you have a range of different foods that trigger you and cause you to go into a storm of bloody diarrhea, how do you do that and feel comfortable about that? Like, how do you go out to eat with friends and just have a good time when you don't know if, this meal that you eat has some ingredient in it, because a lot of them don't really understand the nutrition connection with their body. It has an ingredient in it that could lead to a flare-up, is what it's called, where they're in the bathroom for 30, 45 minutes because, there's bloody diarrhea, and you don't want to go back to the table risking that it may come back out.
You don't want to rejoin the dinner party.
Yeah. So this is the experience of a lot of people with IBD. And a lot of times there's a lot of hopelessness. There's just lack of understanding. Like I said, most people have never heard of it. I'm sure many people listening right now had really not understood what IBD means. You may have heard of it before, but really understanding, okay, what is Crohn's disease? What is colitis? It's your immune system attacking the lining of your digestive tract. And this is, getting diagnosed with this, you need the right information, you need the right guidance, because if you're just relying on your doctor, the pharmaceutical route it doesn't work. It doesn't work with any autoimmune diseases for the most part. The pharmaceutical approach is a very poor approach for autoimmune disease. And the reason being is you're not dealing with the underlying problem. And I know, Alex, you talk about this all the time, I know, but we have to look at okay, what's driving the disease? And the way that I look at all gut issues, and there's some specific things that are going to stand out a little bit more with IBD, but the way that I look at all gut issues is I put together this framework that I kind of work, any client that I work with, we look at these 5 pillars of digestive health. And these 5 pillars entail, different segments of digestion that are important. So these 5 pillars are, number 1, the microbiome. So I know you've talked about the microbiome on your podcast before. It's incredibly important for, the regulating the immune function. It's incredibly important for helping to digest foods. It's incredibly important for the synthesis of vitamins and minerals and amino acids and neurotransmitters. And if there's what's called dysbiosis, which can be, this can be defined in many different forms. It can be yeast overgrowth, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, E. coli infection, salmonella infection, H. pylori. Like, there's so many aberrations that can occur to the microbiome that can lead to this inflammatory process that we see in IBD. So microbiome, number 1, and this one's really important. That's the first pillar of digestive health, and that it's important in all digestive conditions. We have to look at the microbiome. Conventional medicine really doesn't right now. Like, they barely do any type of stool test or anything like that to look at the microbiome. Most of my clients who have had IBD have gotten no type of stool testing in the past. Like, they've gotten no type of stool testing from their GI docs. And it's like,
right, you could be on a medication for 2 years and nobody's checked what's going on.
Just, they don't even think about okay, this is salmonella, this could be E. coli, this could be Clostridia overgrowth, this could be a number of different infections that could be targeted and actually dealt with.
Neutralized.
Yeah, exactly. But the microbiome is a new science. And when there's a new science, it takes a long time for it to get into clinical practice. If you have a doctor who graduated from medical school in 2005 and they've been practicing since 2005, what they learned didn't include the science that's been developed since 2005. And most doctors are full-time practitioners and not researchers. So they're not keeping up with that science. And since then, in 2005, we couldn't even measure the microbiome very well. Now we can run a stool test, send it through DNA genomic analysis, and get a very fine profile of what's going on. We don't know how to interpret it that well at this point, But we can measure it now,
we can see.
and we couldn't 15 years ago. So now that we can measure it, now there's more research, we're understanding it better. And you have to have, like, if you have IBD and you're working with a GI doc who isn't reading research 10 to 15 hours per week, they're going to be behind. Like, they're really not going to understand how to these cutting edge approaches and things, that some of the things that we'll talk about, like some of the things that you need to focus on in terms of really getting your condition under control. So that's one, the microbiome. Number two is the intestinal lining. So the health, and it's called, I refer to it as intestinal barrier function. That's the health of the lining of the intestine. If you have IBD, that's destroyed. Like, there's going to be damage to that gut lining. So that damage has to be dealt with. Now, the damage is happening secondary to the microbiome or some other issue, typically the immune system, which is another pillar that I'll talk about in a second. But supporting the repair of that tissue is important. So looking at the intestinal lining in terms of IBD, some of the things that we can support that tissue is to, one, try to reduce inflammation, but provide the intestines with the nutrients that are required in order to repair that tissue. So we look at glutamine is an important one there. There's some preliminary research that shows that glutamine might help with the intestinal barrier function. Another one is going to be zinc. So zinc is another one that can help reduce what's called leaky gut sometimes, or intestinal permeability. And that's probably going to be helpful. And there's good data to show zinc supplementation in IBD is likely helpful in most cases. Another thing that's really important is butyrate. And butyrate is a short chain fatty acid that we don't get through our diet. We can get a little bit through butter, but it's mainly produced by the bacteria in our small intestine, or in our large intestine. These are called butyrate producing bacteria. And when they produce this butyrate, they calm down the immune response and help to repair the tissue of the gut lining. And
am I accurate in saying, I don't mean to pause you right here, but am I accurate in saying that butyrate is the direct result of resistant starches reaching those bacteria in the large intestine, and then the bacteria converting those to butyrate? Is that correct?
Exactly. So you have to have the resistant starches. Other fibers can help produce butyrate as well. Resistant starches just have the most pronounced effect, but it's the combination of the resistant starches plus the butyrate producing bacteria. We see in IBD that there's, and I'll talk about genetics in a little bit, but genetic factors that predispose people with IBD, they're mostly in the genes that code for the immune cells that identify and neutralize potentially pathogenic bacteria. So when we look at the microbiome, one of the reasons that the microbiome is shifted in a negative way in many people with IBD is because the genetic factors that influence the immune system that normally would keep those bacteria in check. So let's say, for example, I got exposed to salmonella. Well, there's a gene called Nod2 gene that's probably the most pronounced in terms of like Crohn's and colitis risk, that it helps the immune system, or the immune cells, it regulates the immune cells that have pattern recognition receptors. And these pattern recognition receptors bind to potentially pathogenic microbes and help to kill them. They'll engulf them or kill them in some other way. And if you have that gene that's predisposes you to Crohn's disease, you're more likely to get infected by something that someone else wouldn't, because of the way your immune system works. So that's an important piece. I mean, all of these things intertwine, and it just gets, the level of complexity just keeps on going once you think about how all these things relate to each other.
For nerds, this is extremely exciting. and then for not so much nerd, you're like, all right. Like, that's just too much. My genes not only influence me, but they influence the way that I attack or don't attack certain microbes that might infect me and damage me. Like, makes you want to pull your hair.
It gets me extremely excited because I love this sort of thing.
Me too. You're
So
in good company.
we have the intestinal lining. The intestinal lining, again, there's going to be different factors that are contributing to breakdown of the intestinal barrier. One of the other things that could be food sensitivities. So some people are sensitive to gluten, some people dairy. That can lead to some damage to the gut lining. Aspirin. This is so important. So many people take aspirin, and that destroys your gut lining. Like, that's one of the factors. I had a stomach ulcer when I was 21 years old because I took ibuprofen for 3 years prescribed, and that destroyed my gut lining, and that led me to, all these other digestive issues later on. So we need to look at, the things that we're taking in terms of medications that are impacting the gut lining as well. Aspirin's probably the most important one, ibuprofen, also like proton pump inhibitors as well, like antacids. Those really affect the microbiome. They affect the gut lining, probably because of the way that they negatively affect the microbiome. But that's another important one. So we're looking at the gut lining. Number 3 is inflammation in the intestinal immunity. This is it when it comes to Crohn's and colitis. Like, intestinal immunity is probably one of the most, this is one of the drivers. And that's, it's a function of the microbiome, because the microbiome, shifts in the microbiome can lead to more inflammation, which can lead to this hyperimmune response in the gut that leads to all the damage that's occurring. But as I mentioned, genetics are a big factor here. And there's a few genes that have been identified at this point, but I'm guessing over the next 10, 15 years, we're really going to have a good profile of all the different genes. And many of them are of the immune system and the way that the immune system responds to the bacteria in our gut and also food that we eat. So some people with Crohn's disease, colitis might be hyper responsive to nightshades, for example. And it may be that their immune system is just pre-programmed to have a poor response to nightshades. And so in each individual, there's going to be certain foods that can potentially trigger the immune response and lead to increased inflammation and make the condition worse. So a lot of times what I recommend is, kind of going what's called an Oligo Antigenic diet, which is you take away all of the primary foods that can drive an immune response in people, and then slowly reincorporate them back into your diet and see if there's any negative effect when you bring these things back in. So like, for example, with nightshades, if you remove them, you bring it back in, you realize that, oh man, I get more joint pain or stomach pain or any other type of pain, then that's probably something that you need to avoid. There's other ways that some people will try to test this, like food sensitivity tests. I'm not a big fan of those because you can test them multiple times. They'll show up different results sometimes depending on the type of test. And sometimes they'll have you removing foods that you don't need to take away. They're just not an accurate measure of what's causing inflammation in your gut.
Can I pause you there too as well? It's been my experience that when you do food sensitivity testing, the end result ends up being about the same as if you would have just eliminated those things and added them one at a time.
Oh, every time.
Because that's what you do.
Every time. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. A food sensitivity test. If you have gut issues, if you have IBD, you're going to show up. Gluten's going to show up. Dairy is going to show up. Corn is probably going to show up. Peanuts are probably going to show up. Like, I can almost tell my clients what's going to show up on a food sensitivity test. So let's just go ahead and eliminate them and reintroduce them and see if there's any benefit from that. Yeah. So intestinal immunity is extremely important. Nutrient deficiencies can lead to poor or pro-inflammatory responses in the gut.
That number 4?
Oh, so no, that was number 3.
Okay,
still.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So intestinal immunity is still number 3. And so what I was saying is that the nutrient deficiencies like vitamin D deficiency, zinc deficiency, vitamin A deficiencies in these nutrients can lead to a pro-inflammatory response. And what happens is our immune system we want inflammation. Inflammation is a good thing. That's how these bacteria are neutralized in the first place. The problem is we have to have what's called, there's certain inflammatory cytokines. There's one called interleukin 10 that basically regulates the immune system. So it keeps a cap on how high the inflammation goes, and it basically puts like a regulator on it. And in IBD, we see variations in the genes that lead to production of this regulatory branch of the immune system. So that's another factor, is if that regulatory component is not on there, it's like, the regulator of our immune system to make sure things don't get out of balance. If it's not functioning for some reason, either genetics, nutrient deficiencies, heightened stress response will also kind of completely get rid of that immune balancing function. Some of these factors can lead to, just excessive inflammation. So immune response, that was number 3. Number 4 is digestive juices. So when we eat our food, we need stomach acid. First, digestion starts in the mouth. So our mucus in our mouth, our saliva, that starts to break down our food. And then once we swallow our food in our stomach, we have stomach acid, we have pepsin. That, when we release the stomach acid and pepsin, that leads to a cascade of different, things happening further along the intestine. So once our food gets to the small intestine, there's bile in there already. There's, digestive enzymes. And if we block stomach acid for any reason, that will stop that cascade and you won't be able to digest your food properly. One of the other things that will block stomach acid is stress, perceived stress, inability to get in a parasympathetic state. So if you're in a hypersympathetic state where you're just stressed all the time and you're eating on the go, you're not going to produce as much stomach acid. And if you produce less stomach acid, you can't digest your food as well. And not digesting your food as well can change the structure of the microbiome further down and can lead to some of these negative effects. The digestive juices usually isn't a big issue in Crohn's and colitis. I run into that more so in IBS. And that's where, I see that the low stomach acid can be a big factor. Usually that's going to be a big factor in people who are taking medication. And that leads to the development of bacterial overgrowth, yeast overgrowth. If you're taking a proton pump inhibitor or an antacid medication, that acid also kills off the bacteria in your small intestine, because we're not supposed, I didn't explain this earlier, but most of our microbiome is concentrated in our colon, and that's further down the digestive tract. So our food goes into our small intestine after our stomach, and then we absorb that food in the small intestine. And we want to absorb our food, and then we want to send the waste product further along to the gut bugs. But if we have too many gut bugs in our small intestine, they get to eat before we eat. And that leads to gas, pain, bloating, and you'll see that 30 minutes after you eat. And that's a good indication for a lot of people that you have bacterial overgrowth in your small intestine, and that can happen from low stomach acid. There's other factors that can be involved with that as well. But low stomach acid is one of the main reasons that I see, because people will take, these antacids like crazy. I mean, I think there's like 10 million people in the United States at any given time taking antacids, and a good portion of those are developing secondary digestive issues and nutrient deficiencies from taking those medications.
Man. Mic drop. Just walk away. I'm just kidding. So
I think I missed something there.
I think we missed the fifth one. I could be wrong.
Motility.
Motility.
Yes,
there it is.
Motility.
Yes.
So the fifth one is motility. So one of the things that I see a lot of people that develop chronic digestive issues, if you're constipated. And constipation a lot of times has to do with what I just talked about, the stress response. If you're constantly in a parasympathetic or in a sympathetic nervous system state, your motility in the muscle contractions that move your food along your digestive tract and push your waste product out of your body like it's supposed to, those muscles there's less energy placed to those muscles. Same thing when we're exercising. When we're exercising, we put ourselves in a fight or flight response, and the blood flow goes away from the gut into the working muscles. That's what happens when we're psychologically stressed. Even though it's a perception and there's no physical stressor, the blood flow goes from the gut to the rest of the body. And being in a parasympathetic state is extremely important for digestion overall, extremely important for motility. But individuals who have chronic constipation, I have so many clients who've been constipated from when they were kids, and it always develops it just progressively develops. Like, when they were 18, they got diagnosed with IBS, and then it got worse, and then it got worse. And then it can lead to, someone developing IBD who wouldn't otherwise have developed it, but they lived in this state of chronic constipation. One of the factors that I think a lot of people, that leads to a lot of constipation for people, is just embarrassment. If you don't, like as a kid, you don't want to go number 2 outside of your home, so that every time you have to go, you hold it, you're teaching your body not to go. And you train the muscles of your digestive tract, because there's muscles in there that you can control to a certain degree. You train those muscles to not go. And over time, I've had clients who literally have 1 to 2 bowel movements a month, and that's the norm. That's how it's been their whole life. And I'm like,
that's brutal.
That leads to issues. Like you will develop digestive issues. So motility is the last one. People who have IBD typically don't have, there's usually not like a huge, they don't notice a huge change in motility until the inflammation gets really bad. And then there's the diarrhea. But in most cases of IBD, I don't see any major changes in motility. So that's not something I pay attention to as much. My focus with IBD is going to be on the microbiome. It's going to be on the intestinal inflammation. And then it's also going to be on, what was the other one? Intestinal immunity. It's going to be on the microbiome. And then it's also going to be on the gut lining. So when I work with the IBD client, those are the 3 things that we're focused on. How do we improve the microbiome through probiotics, through antimicrobials, through changing the diet with prebiotics? There's different strategies for building up healthy gut bacteria, making sure that we keep the bad guys at bay. And that's one of the main factors that we're looking at. In terms of immunity, how do we get the inflammation down? Whether that be, turmeric and fish oil to just like really reduce the inflammation, with the supplement, or an anti-inflammatory diet, identifying those things that might be triggering to that particular person's immune system through an elimination or reintroduction, and these factors. And then number 3, how do we support the rebuilding and the repair of the digestive tract, whether that be glutamine, zinc, aloe, slippery elm root, MSM, there's a few different supplements that can be helpful there. And also the butyrate. So like trying to support butyrate production. You can actually supplement with butyrate directly as well. And then, trying to build insulin resistant starches so that we can increase internal butyrate production, and also maybe supplement with some probiotics that are butyrogenic, meaning that they help to produce butyrate. Those are the main things. Like when I sit down with the client, if you have IBD, those are the things that we're sitting down and saying, okay, where can we work on these factors?
Man, so going back to your digestion, I gotta chew on this because we've all got to digest everything that just happened just now. So first of all, thank you for that, because you have in the way that you are coaching your clients with these pillars, it's similar to the approach I take from an exercise and nutrition perspective when we're working on body composition goals, and it helps take all of the large body of research that hasn't quite made it to normal practice for people, and boils it down in a way that's repeatable as a professional to help guide people through stages. So I think the first thing I want to say here is just, I appreciate you bringing this and saying this. If you're listening right now, this is stuff I wish we taught in school that probably will be taught 30 years from now if we get our heads out of our butts. And that's awesome. But it's not there yet. And so a lot of us are learning this late in adulthood, like, oh, I should probably take care of my large intestine. I've only had it for 50 years. Dang, I should probably do something about this. So all that said, thank you. I appreciate this. The second thing I want to say is, if you're feeling overwhelmed right now, that's one of the reasons that I brought Dr. Adrian Chavez on the show. Because look, if you're having a hard time sifting through this, then connect with a professional. I mean, I know it's hard. If you've dealt with some of the symptoms he's talking about here, and I have a confession to make as well here in a second, but if you've dealt with some of these symptoms, then you're in a position where this feels like it's been a part of your life forever, and it's going to continue to suck forever. And what I hope you hear from what we're talking about here is that this is actually a problem that you can break down into pieces and deal with. It just takes some guidance. It takes some wherewithal. It takes some discipline and consistency, but you can get there. It's possible. If you've had bloody diarrhea before, that's something we can handle. And by we, I mean Dr. Chavez here. Because if you get on the phone talking about bloody diarrhea with me, we're going to be navigating in the dark. All right. But Dr. Chavez has got you. The last thing I want to say here is I really appreciate your approach to this, because I had my first, or at least my first on record, ulcerative colitis flare in February of this year. And I got on the show and I talked about it. I interrupted my True Fit series. I stopped and I was like, look, I don't know exactly what happened to me, but here's the experience, and I have Ehlers Danlos. It's a genetic disorder that makes collagen production really difficult for my tissues, which has all kinds of fun cascading effects. But one of the effects is I've had a finicky stomach since I was I don't know, as long as I can remember. You're talking about the kid who doesn't want to poop in public? That was me. I didn't want to poop in public. I took all my clothes off. didn't want to get poop on my clothes, like stood on the seat. No joke. Like the 8-year-old Alex was like I'm not doing this. But in addition to that collagen production problem, I have in the fitness world, like I've tried just about every supplement. I've tried just about every diet I can think of. Like I've done a lot of these things in dumb, blind ways. And it hit me like a ton of bricks when I had to fight. I'm not really sure what I fought, maybe the flu or something, but I had a large inflammatory response, immune inflammatory response. I could feel it in my joints and all that stuff. And then the fallout, the residual fallout from a digestive perspective, just it was a ruined gut for days. And I literally thought I had colon cancer. I was like, this is it. Like, I need to start writing letters to my boys. I need to go get a colonoscopy. I'm probably going to be going through, anyway, all that. Long story short, I found your work on these problems and started to address it as if I was addressing ulcerative colitis. Come to find out that's what I was dealing with, and saw a significant improvement, not only in my condition, but also in my outlook on, hey man, I don't have to live with a crummy gut for the rest of my life. Like I don't have to have diarrhea 7 times a day. No joke. That's what I was living with. All right. So all that to say, thank you for bringing this. Thank you personally from me to you. And if you're listening to this right now and you've dealt with these digestive things, like you don't have to, and I'm not the person to call about it. So I'll put your contact stuff in the show notes below.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you sharing your story. And what you just said, it just like you don't have to live with this. Like there's a level of like, yeah, I mean, if you're bloated after a night of pizzas and drinks, like you don't have a digestive issue. But there's 10 to 15% of the population that is just living with it, and they go out to eat and they're scared. I work with these clients all the time, and I hear the stories, and it's like scared to go out to eat. I just stay in because I don't want to. I don't go over to friend's house. I won't travel. Certain areas like it. But there's a solution. This, as you mentioned, this 5-step, 5 pillars of digestive health that I broke down. I mean, digestive problems are complicated. They really are, and they're, because of all the factors that I just mentioned, they're really difficult. If you go see a normal nutritionist, someone who doesn't have expertise in the area that I do and hasn't read the thousands of research papers that I have in gut health, they're probably not going to help you very much. And that's where I see a lot of people run into, where they feel helpless is like, oh, they try to do all the research and, it's overwhelming. And then they go to a nutritionist and they can't help them very much. But I think we'll see more nutritionists specializing in certain things like this, like specializing in digestive health, and really being able to help people with some science, because there's plenty of science that really kind of helps to guide what you can do in these particular areas. There's probiotics that have been effective. Like there's a probiotic called Bioome that's studied in ulcerative colitis that has some pretty good results. There's antimicrobials like wormwood has shown some positive benefit in Crohn's patients. But it's really important, as you mentioned, this is a serious chronic condition. You wouldn't try to prescribe your own medication if you had Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis. And that's why it's extremely important to find a professional who can help you. And I'm not just saying that to like, hey, come work with me. Not at all. Like 100%, if you have IBD or a serious digestive issue, like extreme case of IBS where you're just miserable, you need to work with a professional. And that may cost you, that may be an investment, but that's an investment in the rest of your life. Like I've had many of my clients are completely medication free, which is rare for IBD. That's rare for someone with Crohn's disease to be managing their condition not on medication and not bleeding and not having the bloody diarrhea, having one normal bowel movement per day. I'd say at least 50% of my clients are in that area, but they found me early. So depending on, the time course of the disease, if you're already on medication, you're a little bit further along, you may not be able to completely go off medication, but you can still manage it very well. Like I have, another segment of clients who they're already started medication, but once they start incorporating the nutrition and doing stress management is extremely important as well. So I don't just talk about nutrition. We're looking at this holistically: sleep, stress management, all the other factors that are involved as well. And then those people though who are even on medication, a lot of times they're able to reduce the dose And then most people, even though they're on medication, they're not completely in remission. They're still having, diarrhea. They're still having stomach pain. And a lot of times you can completely get that under control with diet. You can completely get that under control with the right strategies, with the right evidence-based supplements. But if you have this type of condition and you're just going on, YouTube or on Google and searching things,
you're gonna have a hard time.
You're probably going to be led in the wrong direction, and I do not recommend that. I highly recommend trying to find, some practitioner who has extensive experience in this, whether it be me or someone else. But that, you have to make that investment, because once you do that, once you get control of it, once you understand your condition better, and you want the practitioner that you're working with to have the heart of a teacher. I don't know if you guys I think about Dave Ramsey when I say that, because I don't know if you're familiar with Dave Ramsey. He always talks about, like, you want to work with people who have the heart of a teacher. At the end of the day, you're going to live with this for the rest of your life. I always explain this to clients, like, you're going to live with this for the rest of your life. You need to learn it better than I know it. Like, you need to know your body better than I do. So I'm going to teach you, these pillars. I'm going to teach you how to modify each of these pillars. I'm going to teach you how to pay attention to what may be out of balance in your own life. But at the end of the day, it's really, you have to be, it goes back to our first episode together. You have to be your own best doctor, and finding the right guidance and getting that help to learn how to walk in this particular area, because this is a very challenging area to navigate, is one of the, most important first steps there.
So I struggle right here, because we could either continue to talk about some of the things that people could start doing for themselves, or I also feel like this is a really good opportunity to kind of wrap it up in a way of how best to think about this and how best to move forward if you're wrestling with the digestive issues. I do want to say that Dr. Chavez did not reach out to me and say, "Hey, Alex, can I come on your show? I would like some more clients just after I get married." He said, he made a post on Instagram, and I was like, "Dude, it's been a while since we've talked. This is something that my audience doesn't get to hear a lot about, and I had a personal experience with it, and I would love for you to come on the show and talk about that, because I've worked with a lot of people from a clinical perspective, working in the training atmosphere, nutrition changes and whatnot. And there are things that come up, especially with regard to digestion, that it's like, look, I'm gonna help you make sure that you get enough protein. I'm gonna help you make sure that you shore up the easy nutrient deficiencies. I'm gonna help you make sure that you don't overdo it on creatine. I'm gonna make sure that all of those things happen.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about, like, restoring your microbiome and reducing your gut inflammation and getting your unique immune system to be happy with the diet you're consuming daily, that is much more like microscopic focus on you as an individual nutritionally.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to hold your hand while we walk through the dark together, but it'd be really, really helpful to work with somebody who's got a flashlight. And that said, that's something that you do well. So I appreciate that. I did want to say there's a psychological trope with regard to genetic disorders, which I am currently navigating through myself. And that is the idea that you will live with this for the rest of your life, period. And one of the things I like to say to people, because, I wrestle with Ehlers Danlos. That's a fun thing with joints and all the other hypermobile things that come with it, right? But I like to say to people who are wrestling, and I've got a relatively mild version compared to those who are wrestling with, like, aneurysms and stuff. This thing can get way worse than what I handle. But I like to say, look, every single person, whether or not it's glaring to them, every single person has to live with their damn DNA, period. That's all there is to it. What we get to do.
That's the first thing that came to my mind when you said that.
Right? Like,
yeah.
Like we all have the little thing. We all have the little things that we have to handle. But the question is, look, like, if we are in a position where our daily behaviors can make a significant impact on our quality and length of life, this IBD stuff can turn into cancer. It really can. Like, if you ruin tissue enough, it gets really abnormal. We don't go get sunburns every day. Like, you don't eat pizza with ulcerative colitis every day. All right. Like, it's bad juju for you. But if you can manifest better and it enhances your quality of life, and people kind of look at you funny because you eat, I don't know, salmon with nothing on it. Like, is that a big price to pay? I don't think so. I don't think that's a big price to pay.
Yeah.
Like,
Another thing, and I'm so glad you set it up that way. Another thing, because a lot of times there's some psychological things that we have to kind of work through too. Because a lot of times I work with clients who are early stage diagnoses, and another thing is, you get to look at this as an opportunity. So I have clients who were eating kind of whatever beforehand, and they developed this IBD, they developed this Crohn's disease, and now they work with me, and we're working on their gut health. But then they feel better. They have more energy. Their skin looks better. They lost weight. They're in better shape now. And they're like, oh, wow. Like, I've struggled with like weight loss in the past. And now that I have to completely, I know that my food is medicine now. And this is my most important form of medicine, that I have to be extremely mindful about what I put into my body. This is allowing me to eat in the way that I always wanted to, or like, I always aspired to, but I can never be fully motivated to do it. So sometimes it's through those struggles that kind of shift your life in a certain way that says, hey, maybe this isn't so bad after all. Like, maybe it isn't so bad after all that I have to eat really healthy. Oh, wow. I have to eat really healthy. Like, for example, in my case, I mentioned I had a stomach ulcer that's the reason I do what I do, is because of that experience. Like, I went to multiple doctors and they gave me medications that made me feel worse. And I had I was like, I knew nutrition for fitness and bodybuilding and that type of thing. But that was the point where I was like, I need to figure this out for myself. And I dug deep into the science and all the crap on the internet. I probably did a lot of the wrong stuff early on because I was 21 years old, 22 years old.
And it took a lot of time.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. So, me experiencing this caused me to shift the way that I ate from, chicken and rice every meal, the typical high protein, not nutrient dense meal, to like completely changing my diet, eating salads and smoothies and like eating much more veggies. And I completely transformed the way that I ate. And that shifted my entire life work. Like I was an exercise science major working with athletes. And that was my goal, was to kind of train athletes. And just this experience was like, there's a bigger purpose. Like there's literally people who are suffering from chronic conditions for which nutrition is the answer. And they need that help. They need the right guidance, because most of what's available isn't the right guidance.
I love it.
So for me, it unlocked the purpose. And I feel like in many cases, you have to look at those trials in a way that you find opportunity for what you can take positive from that and grow.
I love that. And I also like to think of it as like, I don't know what it is in human psychology that requires a significant excuse to make a good change for yourself. It's so true, man. I was in the car with somebody recently, and is a guy I know from church. I'm not going to use any names, but anyway, so we were talking about, he's like, oh, so you're into this exercise thing. I'm like, yeah, kinda. I mean, it's like my livelihood. And I spend hours talking about it on the internet, and I train clients, but yeah, I'm into this exercise thing. He's like, I should really do some more cardio. And I'm always curious. I said, what's stopping you? Like, what's stopping you from, doing the running that you need to do, or eating the foods that you need to eat? And honestly, I like to ask that question, but I've never had anybody be as honest as him. And he said, I'm waiting for a heart attack. And like, I didn't know what to say, because I was like, what? But at the same time, it's true, because it seems to me that when it comes to making a very difficult change, it's almost like the pain drives that change. I wish we could all make changes when we're feeling hunky-dory, but we're not. And same with my diet. I had to be writhing in pain at 3 a.m. for multiple nights before I was like, hey, maybe a lot less beef, some resistant starches, and a lot more fish in my world. And, there's a lot more changes, obviously, that went along with that for ulcerative colitis. But what I'm saying here, though, is if you are somebody who's wrestling with this, think of it this way. It's possible that 30 years from now, there will be an app that breaks down your entire genetic makeup and tells you when you do stupid things that would probably, shorten your life and cause diseases to happen. We're not there yet, but it's possible. If you are wrestling with an IBD, that app is called Your Gut, and it's giving you a nice ping every single time that's like, hey, something's not right here, man. And I mean, it sucks, but it's very possible that you will come to a place where you are much better off. You're much more optimal than you would ever be if it wasn't for what you're wrestling with right now. So I guess all that to say, I don't mean to like make this a sales pitch for you, brother, but I really mean it. Like, if you're listening to the sound of my voice and you're wrestling with this and you need somebody to hold your hand through it, call this guy. Click the link or whatever he's going to send me below, because I want them to get in touch with you. But it's huge. You could be much better off than you are right now. It's not just a finicky digestive tract. We have those moments, but most of the people wrestling with this know exactly what we're talking about right now, and they're like, "Oh crap, that's me." I'm not saying anything about it. So anyway, I appreciate you coming on. I like to leave my people with the last word, brother. What's on your mind to leave us with?
Man, I think you just you nailed it right there, and I really appreciate you bringing me on. Honestly, I want to give you thanks in the last word. You're putting out this great content, and I'm just, in terms of parents and being fit and the next generation, like this is the most important thing. Like we have to get our place to our country, our population, our kids. We have to just change the landscape, and you're pushing for that, and you're just an example. Like, the fact that you're dealing with two genetic condition and autoimmune condition, and you're still pressing forward. Like, there's few dads that I look at that I'm like, man, that person's fit and they push me forward. And you're one of them. Like, when I see you posting your runs, when I see you posting your lifts, I'm like, all right, I got to go out there and get this 4 miles in 35 minutes now, because Alex is out there, crushing it, and he's dealing with these other issues. Like, no excuses whatsoever. So man, the everything that you're doing, I just so appreciate, who you are and the example that you're setting for the dads and for the future generation.
Thanks for that. I'm gonna knuckle bump you. Although I'm a hugger, since we're social distancing, I can't.
Yeah, we can't hug you. That's just can't do all that.
But I appreciate you, man. Thank you for that. I'll keep doing what I'm doing. You keep doing what you're doing, and I think together we'll make the world a better place, or at least that's the goal.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Well, to the listeners, guys, thanks so much for listening. There was a ridiculous amount of value in this show. I would almost recommend going back and listening to it again and taking notes if this is pertinent to you. I can't imagine that it's not, between COVID immunity and gut health. But and then if you're not connected to Dr. Adrian Chavez, I will post the link not only to his website but also to his
Instagram is a place to find me. I do not keep up with my website, so Your Nutrition Prescription on Instagram. Yeah.
I will put the link to his Instagram below, and then give him a little bit of a benefit of the doubt here if he doesn't get back with you in the next week. The dude just got married, so like that's like he's on his way to the altar.
Yeah.
So mutual love to you, brother. I'm looking forward to the 5th time I get to have you on the show, which will no doubt be awesome as well. Thanks for your time today, and I hope you have a good one. And to the listeners, everybody, kick butt and take names. 1, 2, 3, 4. The free practical advice and conversations here remain unbought and unbiased, thanks to the support of listeners just like you. If this episode's been helpful to you, please share it with somebody in your life who you know it will benefit. Then subscribe to the podcast and leave us a raving review to tell others what value Defining Dad Bod has brought to your health and fitness journey. And finally, if you want more Defining Dad Bod, consider joining our online community. We send a lot of free perks and resources your way, and I, Coach Alex, go live every month to talk through our listeners' health and fitness questions to make the practical science of this show applicable to everyday life. Everyone's welcome, and we'd love to have you. For more information about joining the Inner Circle or becoming a supporter of the Defining Dad Bod podcast, go to definingdadbod.com/inner circle. That's definingdadbod.com/inner circle.